Hi friends, welcome to my channel. In this lecture, we will discuss about a typical Azure Data Engineering project architecture. Okay, nowadays everyone using cloud, AWS or Azure or GCP for data engineering and data science projects. So in this lecture, we'll discuss about how the Azure Data Engineering uh, project architecture overall. Maybe it will be differ from project to project, but overall, this is the architecture. The source will be, any ETL project will have a source and a target and processing layer. Similarly, Azure ecosystem also. So we have uh, data engineering modules like Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, okay, Databricks, all these things. So for every ETL project, there will be different sources. Similarly, for Azure Databricks projects also, source will be a 90% it will be a RDBMS like Oracle or MySQL. Okay, because daily business OLTP transactions will be happening in a legacy happening in the legacy application, and data will be stored in the Oracle or SQL Server or MySQL based on the project. Okay, so here in this diagram, I have taken four sources. Okay, first one is a SQL Server, that is on-premise SQL Server. Next, one more second source is a Oracle server in AWS, hosted in AWS cloud. Next, Azure SQL. This is already available in Azure cloud only. Third source. This is fourth source is a file system. Okay, these are the four sources to our project. Okay, Azure SQL Server, if it is an on-premise SQL Server, for example, this is a separate, that SQL Server is available in a separate system, okay, not in Azure. Then how to read data from, how to load data from on-premises SQL Server database to Azure is using ADF, okay, Azure Data Factory. This is a cloud ETL tool. Okay, so first this is the source and this is the ingestion layer. That is nothing but we will ingest, we will load the data from different sources to the Azure using Azure Data Factory. Next, once you read and source is these are all four systems. So for Azure Data Factory, sync will be means destination will be ADLS. Here using Azure Data Factory, we will read that data, whatever data is required for our project. We will read that tables or files and load it to the Azure Data Lake Gen 2. This is a staging area. This is a ADLS Gen 2. ADLS means Azure Data Lake Storage. Okay. Gen 2 means the latest version. Earlier Gen 1 was there. Now Microsoft, now it is depreciated. That it has been removed. Only Gen 2 is there. Okay. Okay. So all that data from the sources will load to the Azure Data Lake Gen 2. That is staging area. All the data will be available in Gen 2. Okay. Periodically, data will be, we will write ADF pipelines. That ADF pipelines will run regularly based on whatever interval you have provided and load the data and keep the files in the ADLS Gen 2. That is staging area. Okay. That is raw data. You can copy to the ADLS Gen 2. That is nothing but a Azure storage. And we for the business logic processing, we will use Azure Databricks. Okay, we will connect to the ADLS from the Azure Databricks by creating mount points. Okay, we will connect that storage using Azure Databricks. Then we will apply transformations. Whatever the business logic, whatever business analyst or your company given the business logic that it will perform in the Databricks using Python or Scala or SQL or R. Okay, Databricks will perform, and once the business logic perform that final data set, you can create tables in a Delta Lake itself. Databricks will support Delta Lake. Okay, so why? What is a Delta Lake? What is data lake? That is we will discuss. That is a lot of differences are there. That we will see in separate video. ID Azure Data Lake Gen 2. It is a data lake. Okay. In Azure Databricks, we have one more system, that is Delta Lake. Okay, Delta Lake will support. In the Delta Lake, we can create databases as well as tables. Okay, it will you can maintain the schema there. Okay, databases, you can create multiple databases in Delta Lake, and in that again multiple tables you can create. Okay, nowadays to store the cloud cost, companies are directly creating after processing in Databricks, companies directly creating databases and the tables in the Delta Lake. Directly they are connecting, then BI layer, this Power BI tools, Power BI or MicroStrategy, directly they are connecting to the Delta Lake tables, because they are skipping this one more layer, that is after processing. Usually earlier, before Delta Lake, once we process the data, we used to store in a SQL, okay, SQL aggregated data only, right? If it is a less than TB, less than terabyte, Azure SQL will give good performance. That normal SQL, any database will give good performance. We used to store here using JDBC from the Databricks. Then we used to connect BI tools to the database and visualize the dashboards. Now, to reduce the cost, they are actually decommissioning this directly. We have a facility to connect VA tools to the Delta Lake tables. Okay, or else you can, once we processed in Databricks, directly you can load that data frame to the Azure SQL or SQL data warehouse. SQL data warehouse here nothing but a dedicated synapse, that is dedicated uh, SQL pool. Okay, dedicated SQL pool. That nothing but a synapse. This is the data warehouse. This is Azure SQL is a database. Okay, so this is from the, once we process data in Azure Databricks, we load to the Azure SQL Synapse, and BI tools, Power BI or MicroStrategy, they will be connected to the Azure SQL or SQL data warehouse, and they can build the dashboards. This is the overall architecture of the a typical Azure data engineering project architecture. So here, you may get some doubts. Okay, SQL Server, how to connect the on-premises SQL Server with the ADF, Azure Data Factory. Okay, this is different platform, right? Cloud is different, on-premises is two different networks. How to establish connection between two different networks? We have self-hosted runtime integration in Azure Data Factory. That is a just piece of a software that we will install in a source where is located, that system, that network, we will install this server. Okay, and in ADF also, Azure Data Factory also, we will create that key. That key will be copied copied in the that IR server. That's how we will integrate. We will establish connection between on-premises and Azure cloud using the self-hosted runtime integration. Okay, so self-hosted runtime integration nothing but one VM. We have to take if a in source, for example, Azure SQL Server is in some different environment. Their same network, you have to install this piece of software on that. Okay, so you can install that self-hosted runtime integration on a Windows operating system only. So if there is no Windows operating system, you have to take one VM. You have to install that Windows operating system. Then you have to install that IR software. It will ask some key. We will generate that key in Azure Data Factory and we'll paste there. Then we'll enable that all whitelisting everything. We will enable that, and then we can successfully establish connection on premises and Azure Data Factory. If it is a on-premises database, on-premises source. Next, if your source is a other cloud, for example, AWS, you have AWS. In that Oracle server is there. In that Oracle tables, you have to load to the Azure. So what you have to do? For on-premises, you have SQL server, you have self-hosted runtime integration. For a cloud-to-cloud connection, you have to follow same thing. You have to go, for example, in AWS, Oracle is there. In same to establish connection between AWS and Azure, you have to create one VM, EC2 VM in Azure, AWS, where Oracle is there in the same network, in same as AWS network, you have to create one Windows VM. Okay, virtual machine you have to take one EC2 instance. There you have to install the Windows operating Windows operating system will be there, right? If you create EC2 Windows machine EC2 server, okay, there you have to install that IR server software. Then, in the same how you have established connection in on-premises, same here also you have to install IR that self-hosted runtime integration software, okay, on AWS EC2 instance. Then we have to copy this Azure Data Factory key there. That connection will be established. But this is separate network, right? So we need to create we need to establish connection between these two different clouds using virtual private network. We need to establish how means you have to whatever server you have installed self-hosted runtime integration software, that IP address you need to whitelist from the Azure side. Okay, you need to establish connection between all that inbound outbound traffic. You need to enable from the AWS side, and what wherever you have installed that IR server IP address, you need to whitelist from the Azure side, Azure cloud side. Okay, then once then the connection will be established. You can as usually you can pull the data using the Azure Data Factory. Next, if your source is already in Azure only, then direct no need to install any software. Directly auto result runtime integration. We can connect to Azure SQL directly, take the data from the Azure Data Factory. Third one is a file system. For example, your data is there in mainframe, Hadoop, all these things. They are also same process. You have to install a self-hosted runtime integration, and you have to take the data. So this is the uh, little bit of this is kind of one software continuously. It has to 24 bar 7 it has to run. Always it will be running that IR server. Then only you can continuously read the data. If IR server is down or it is stopped, then you cannot read the data. Okay. So that also this is the uh, briefly about how we can connect to the different sources for the Azure Data Engineering projects. I can pull the data. Always source will be a RDBMS only, like a Oracle, MySQL, or a SQL Server. And Azure Data Factory, it is a cloud ETL tool. Only using this, we can uh, read the data. We can load to the Azure data data lake, and we can schedule the pipelines. Okay. So in the upcoming videos, I will be creating that Azure Data Factory playlist. There we'll discuss all things. What is Azure Data Factory? What are the activities in that? There are many activities that we will discuss. All the activities. Azure Data Lake Gen 2. This is a storage. Okay, processing layer. Nothing but Azure Databricks. Once that Azure Databricks business logic is applied, then that final data sets will be loaded to the Azure SQL or any target database. That is the SQL data warehouse or Azure SQL, any target based on your project company decision. You can use that the target database. That database you can load the data frame to the data databases using JDBC. From the database, Power BI tools will be connected to the Azure SQL or Synapse and visualize the dashboard. This is the typical data engineering architecture of Azure. Okay, so all these components in upcoming videos we will be discussing. Okay.